What I'm going to try to do for the next few minutes is to take you through some various activities at the Bronze Foundry for CR Bronzeworks and Eagle Foundry. Not necessarily in chronological order, but you're going to see a lot of the things that happen, and I'll try to talk you through them. This is the electric furnace that melts the bronze ingot to make the bronze plaques, and as you can see here, CJ is checking the temperature. He's adjusting the heat so that he can make sure that that bronze inside there is melting and will be ready for casting here in a while. That process takes quite a while to heat that up and melt that bronze. Here he's packing down the sand around a plaque or grave marker, putting some more of this sort of petroleum-based sand in the pattern and packing it firmly around. It holds its shape and allows you to take a plaque like this with this aluminum pattern with these letters that have been glued onto the pattern, put that in the sand, and then pack the sand around it, and it retains that exact shape. So you can lift that pattern, that aluminum pattern with the letters on it, out, and the impression that's made is what you pour the bronze into. So he's taking some of this sand that has been finely packed around inside the pattern here, around the pattern. Just shows the process that they go through on each grave marker and each plaque to get it ready so that they can pour the bronze into it. And he's showing how you get it nice and smooth and all the things that you have to do just for one grave marker to get it ready for casting. What you see now is him going over again and checking the furnace and checking the temperature again. You can see that on the ground there in front of him are a lot of things all ready to be poured. Some of them are bronze vases, grave marker vases. Those rectangles are larger grave markers, probably 24 by 14 grave markers. And they have to have quite a few of them on the ground for a pour. They don't just heat up all that bronze metal and do two. They have to do 30, 40, 50 at a time to make it worthwhile. And they do this about once or twice a day. They work 4 12-hour shifts, and in a 12-hour shift, they can do 1 or 2 heats each day. Again, just doing some things that they do to get those patterns ready. And they just keep, while that bronze is heating up in the furnace, they just keep working and take those plaques and grave markers that the girls have set up, and they just keep going until they've got as many as they can get on the floor. What you can see here is them putting the clamps on the patterns to hold those two sections together so that when they poured the bronze in, they don't separate. Now James is pulling the crucible of liquid bronze out of the furnace, and they're going to do what it takes to get this crucible ready so they can start pouring. And as you can see, it's extremely hot. This is like lava. If that got on your foot would melt. And you do not want to rush this, and you do have to be extremely careful. And so they're getting things ready, and then they're going to use the crane and move that crucible over to the place where they need to start the very first pour. He's removing some of the slag and the impurities and the things that they don't want to go into the grave markers. He's kind of pulling that off and just letting it fall on the ground. Now they're getting ready to lift this again and move it with the crane slowly and carefully over to where they will carefully start doing each pour. And they have to go fast enough, but careful enough, fast enough that it doesn't cool down too much, and then they can't pour anymore. So CJ's moving that down, wearing his protective coat and gloves and their face masks, and it takes 3 of them to now carefully start pouring that liquid bronze into the holes that they make, and then that bronze spreads out into that pattern, and they hope that it fills the entire pattern perfectly. Now, this is what we say when we talk about a misrun. A misrun would be where the bronze goes in, but it doesn't make it all the way to all the edges of the pattern, or there's a bubble, or there's a hole that it leaves, or it doesn't fill all the letters. So not every time does everything pour perfectly. That's why they don't want to tear down a pattern until they know that it has poured perfectly. So they're kind of making sure that that bronze is clean and pure, and kind of pushing back some of the slag that forms as it cools off. As you can see, they have big, heavy steel weights on that so that the sand doesn't fall apart when they're doing this. And then they go down the next row. And so then you can see right here, there's the hole, there's the bronze going in, and then they have to try to pour just enough and hope that they pour just enough to make it to all the places in the bronze pattern that's in there. Doesn't always work perfectly, as you can see. This is not an exact science. And so it takes quite a while just to do this part of the process, let alone getting everything ready to get to this point. You can see that in that case right there, they accidentally poured a little too much and it poured out over the top. Now they're getting kind of towards the end of what's in the crucible, and it's a little more tricky to get it in there. So now you can see that those patterns are now sitting on the ground. Fire's coming out of them. That bronze is extremely hot. You can't do anything with these patterns, with these castings for a while until they've cooled off sufficiently. And in the meantime, while this is all going on, the girls are on the other side of the shop in another building, and they're doing shipping. They're getting other plaques ready for another casting round. It probably takes the girls at least 20 to 30 minutes per marker to do all the layouts and to do all the gluing, and that, you know, the more lettering and the more complicated it is, the longer it takes, obviously. And so this is a hand set plaque. They're using metal letters and then measuring and gluing them down to an aluminum pattern. You can also see that there's a rubber polymer as part of this marker, and that is a stamp that is made and then kind of speeds things up and makes things go a little faster. We have hundreds of patterns, and a lot of our customers, grave markers and cemeteries and funeral homes, use a lot of these patterns. They offer all of them to their customers. So a customer, they may have 5 orders in, but they're all on different patterns, which of course speeds things up. This is Char trying to look for a particular pattern for the girls to set up with. This is Laura gluing each letter one at a time onto this pattern. That has to dry, and you know, sometimes what happens is those letters shift after they get past this process, and then they have to recast. Here's just a bin full of metal letters right here. Laura carefully doing another grave marker. Again, this part of the process is also not something you can do fast. Now, this is a polymer, so the polymers allow us to have any font that we want, and it kind of speeds things up in a way and lets us do, and we do a lot of polymers. This is Todd back over on the other side of the shop doing some prep work on the marker, getting all the high edges sanded and gold. This marker has already been painted dark brown, a flat dark brown paint. Then he sands off the paint in the high edges so that it, and on the letters, so that then it's ready. After this process, it's ready to go into the painting booth and get a clear coat, a clear protective coat. Here's a whole bunch of vases that were done. And so we have to keep up with all the vase orders that come in, because a lot of the plaques will require a vase. So Todd takes each marker down and does all the finish sanding on these to get them ready for that final painting. This is a big machine that takes the sand after the castings have been done, and it breaks it back up and loosens it back up and makes it a fine sand again, so they can reuse it for the next round. So now in the day, they're at the point where the markers have cooled down enough that they can wheel them over to the other side of the shop and take them out of the sand, see if they cast all the way perfectly. This is where they find out if they've cast, and that means if they've cast all right, they can now take the letters and take them off and use that pattern again if they need to. But they have to wait till they see it cast okay and that it did not misrun. I can't tell, but that one looked like it misran. You can see a big hole in the top of the marker, and that one may have misran. The bronze didn't go all the way, so they have to redo that one. And they don't want to tear the letters off the pattern until they find that out, because they don't want to have to re-glue all the letters back onto a pattern and start all over again, too soon. They want to make sure it casts perfectly first. So now one by one, they're taking all the markers over to this side of the shop. Here's just an example of a pattern with a lot of letters and a lot of work. And this one was probably done with a polymer and not hand set. A lot of big patterns for, companion grave markers, some custom patterns, just big markers. There's a VA marker, there's one of your markers, a baby marker. And now once they've decided that the pattern, everything cast properly, then they can take the pattern over, put the acetone on the letters to dissolve the glue, and now remove those letters, and they can use that pattern again and start over. Here are a couple scroll plates in the sand. And then, just making sure that that pattern is clean and ready for another go around. Taking the pattern back over to the other side of the shop so the girls can now start laying out, gluing another one of your markers. This is how many that ship every day. And so just to do the layout, just to lay it out and glue the letters on to one of your patterns takes about 30 minutes just for your marker. And keep in mind that we have about 1,000 to 2,000 customers that all are ordering, and so there's a lot of work to do to keep up with everybody's orders. And there's Laura kind of finishing up, getting close to finishing up one of those, and that kind of gives you an idea of the process, and that things don't go super fast, and at most we can do 1 to 2 pours a day, but that doesn't mean that we can do 2 pours with your patterns every day, because of the process and the waiting, and then for that pattern to go back to the girls for them to re-glue and redo. You're lucky if you can get 1 pour a day for those patterns that we have for your work.